Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. I am Dr. Pat Carroll, here to share a word of encouragement with you. During this time of restricted travel and socialization, if anyone has a strategy to deal with these such challenging times, it should be us, Kingdom Kids. Let us take a look at the Apostle Paul and how he dealt with difficult times. Allow me to set the stage for my presentation. After they had stayed at Antioch for some time, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in all the cities where we have told the good news from the Lord and see how they're getting on." Now, Barnabas wanted to take Mark with them, but Paul disagreed. So they parted company. Barnabas took Mark with him to Cyprus. Paul chose Silas, and commended by the brothers, they went through Syria and Cilicia and several other places. However, when Paul tried to enter Bithynia, the Spirit of Jesus did not allow it. So they ended up going down to Troas. It is in the 16th chapter of Acts that we find the Apostle Paul and Silas in Macedonia, and they were directed there by a man in a night vision. Verse 9, we're in chapter 16, verse 9. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man in Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once, leaving for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Now we're on verse 16. Once when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. She followed Paul and the rest, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved." Now that sounded right, but it was the wrong spirit. She kept this up for many days, and finally Paul had had enough. He was so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." And at that moment, the spirit left. Now, when her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "Please, these men are Jews, and they're throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept and practice." It had nothing to do with customs. It had nothing to do with things they were losing money, y'all. These officials, they ordered Paul and Silas then to be stripped and beaten and thrown into prison. This is how they ended up in the worst part of the prison with their feet in stocks. The officials ordered that Paul and Silas be stripped and beaten, as I said, but about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying, singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening. Suddenly, there was a violent earthquake that the foundation of the prison was shaken, and all at once the prison doors were opened. Everybody's chains came off. Everybody. The jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here." The Apostle Paul used this situation that the devil meant for evil, but God meant it for good. The prison guard received the call to salvation. He and his family were saved. Paul and Silas were relieved. Every chain was broken, not only for these men of God, but also for everyone in the prison that night. We see many lessons in this passage, but I want to focus on the power of praise. If worship were optional, Paul and Silas would not have been singing with bloody backs in the Philippian dungeon at midnight. Number two, Paul and Silas had made a strategic invasion of Macedonia. This was enemy territory, a stronghold of Satan. And within it, many victims were held captive to do Satan's will, like that young lady. It was not Paul's original intention to be in that area, but God. We know how that works. Praise shakes things up. Earthquakes come out of nowhere, causing chains to be broken and captives to be set free. Pastor John Piper described it this way. They ripped off their clothes and beat them with rods. These rods broke the skin, raised welts and bruises, and sometimes broke ribs. Then Paul and Silas were put into the deepest part of the prison, damp, cold, rat infested. And to increase security and misery, their feet were put in stocks. You can read the whole story in Acts chapter 16, verse 24. They lay there all afternoon and into the night. Foreign territory, no advocates in the city hall, their backs open to infection, surrounded by darkness, shivering from the cold, unable to adjust their position, hundreds of miles from home, and their invasion of Macedonia had barely begun. You know, it just doesn't get much worse than that. And their most powerful weapons to deal against the powers of darkness? Prayer and praise. Pastor Piper suggests they may have even sung this song that we find in Isaiah. How lovely on the mountains are the feet of them who brings good news, announcing peace, news of happiness. Our God reigns, our God reigns, our God reigns, our God reigns. If we want power in God, let us worship with all our heart and all our soul and all our strength. You see, God sits enthroned on the praises of his people. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. It's good enough for me. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. It's good enough for me. God bless you.